It's no secret that I love Metroidvania games. Bloodstained, Castlevania, Super Metroid, Hollow Knight, just to name a few. The cycle of exploration just to find something that you can't interact with yet, just to find an item that will help you go back to interact with that other thing just so you can explore some more, is a loop that I just can't get enough of. However, with the way the indie market is today, it's really hard for good game developers to get their name out there, and as such, a lot of Metroidvania titles that are really good have gone relatively unnoticed. And that's why I wanted to make today's video. I think that—
Whoa, hold on a minute there. You still have something to do.
What's wrong? What's going on, you weird little closet goblin?
You haven't introduced a sponsor yet for this video. That's really important.
Well, that makes sense. Go ahead, take it away.
This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid Shadow Legends is one of the most ambitious RPG projects of 2019 and has just been released. It's a mobile game that can only really be compared to the biggest PC and console titles today, and it's totally free. With an amazing storyline, awesome 3D graphics, giant boss fights, PvP battles, and hundreds of champions to collect and customize, it's no wonder that over 10 million players have already downloaded the game in only 6 months. Just look at the detail on these champions. My favorite is this dual-wielding mad lad of an orc. I mean, look at him. I'm always down for using him to wipe out my enemies in the arena. Raid has an almost perfect score on the Play Store with almost 300,000 reviews and is growing super fast. They've even published a roadmap for updates over the next 6 months, such as a new faction, tag team arenas, and even a new clan boss that you can fight with your clanmates. With so much content, there's no time to get bored. So what are you waiting for? Go to the video description, click on the special links, and you'll get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as a part of the new player program to start your journey. Good luck, heroes. Alright, I'm gonna level with you here. I completely forgot when I was recording earlier to finish my introduction to this video. And now the camera's not in the booth anymore, so all you're gonna get is this voiceover. The 5 games that I'm gonna be going over in this video are 5 Metroidvania titles that are a little more obscure than what you would expect. So that means all the games that I mentioned earlier, like Hollow Knight, Super Metroid, Castlevania, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, those are all out. Those do not qualify for this video. My goal here is to get some of these smaller Metroidvania games a little more exposure that I think they deserve, and to give all of you who I expect enjoy a good Metroidvania as much as I do, a few new games that you hopefully haven't played and will hopefully really enjoy. This is my list of 5 relatively obscure Metroidvania games that you probably haven't played. The first pair of games on this list, in spite of how good I think they are, I have not yet beaten them. La-Mulana and La-Mulana 2 are incredibly difficult, not just in the gameplay aspect, but also in the way the puzzles present themselves to the player. Both La-Mulana and La-Mulana 2 are very long and they're very obtuse. You take the role of an archaeologist who goes into some ancient ruins and tries to discover what lies beneath and eventually probably save the world. But you're not just dealing with the enemies of the ruins, you're dealing with traps, you're dealing with puzzles, and you're trying to figure out your way through this weird labyrinthian area. Now, I'll admit, when I played La-Mulana 1, I eventually got fed up with the puzzles because I didn't know what to expect, and I looked up a guide and just kind of trudged my way through it that way. However, if you want to pick this game up for yourself, I urge you to try and solve the puzzles and get through the game by yourself without using a guide, because when you finally solve any of the puzzles in these games, the sense of pride and accomplishment is just through the roof. It's through the roof. You might be solving a really complicated riddle that spans halfway across the game's map, or you might just put one and one together and notice that the skeleton is talking about a false wall, so you go and look at the false wall and bada bing bada boom, you find yourself on the other side of the ruins. All the puzzles in this game are deliberate, and at times it can feel really unfair, especially when you fall into a trap that just instantly kills you without really even knowing that that was going to happen. It's going to happen a lot. These ruins are not for the faint of heart, and neither are these games. But I stand by that these are some of the more satisfying games to play. The movement is crisp, the puzzles, while a little confusing at first, can wind up being something very memorable, and because of the way that you have to move around these ruins, you become really intimately familiar with the game, its map, and its lore, and all the puzzles that you're trying to solve. There are a few things in the game to help you solve these puzzles, like the ability to save some of the text that you find on tablets inside your little laptop, or even something as simple as the ability to look at a map and see what rooms are named to help you discover the possible solution for some of these puzzles. But because of these puzzles specifically, and as unforgiving as some of the action in the game is, La-Mulana and La-Mulana 2 are incredibly long. They're a huge time commitment. But if you're looking for the most bang for your buck, La-Mulana and La-Mulana 2 are going to go very far for you. As long as you're not afraid of a few puzzles and some relatively challenging traps and enemy placements, that is. Like I said, I haven't beaten these games myself because of the huge time commitment, but there's something about the satisfaction that solving these puzzles and slowly working your way through these ruins brings for me. And because of that, I definitely want to sit down and finish these titles. What's more, I heard that they are coming to the Nintendo Switch, both La-Mulana 1 and La-Mulana 2. So if you'd rather play these games on the go, and I think that these games would be very, very good on the Switch, and very, very good to play on the go. So if you'd rather play it on Switch, you just gotta wait a little bit longer, and you'll find them on the Nintendo eShop. Now this next game is a little weird. It's a little old school. I'd say it's barely a Metroidvania, but it's one of the games that I've gone back to time and time again and have had a really, really good time with. Castle in the Darkness is a small game, and a lot of it feels like it was created by an amateur game developer. But what does exist in this game is really satisfying. What you have here is a retro-inspired game with some really high difficulty, some pretty challenging platforming, some interesting boss fights, and a lot of interesting items to discover, and a world that seems to keep on giving. There are a lot of quality of life features that are going to be missing from this game, such as the ability to open a map, the ability to see where each area lies relative to another, but this game also rewards you for keeping things in your head very, very well. Once you unlock the double jump, you might remember that there's something that was just out of reach a little earlier on, and you might want to head back and see what that is, because it could power you up and it could make the future boss battles easier. And when I say this game has challenging platforming, I mean it. Spikes will one-hit kill you, there's certain areas in the game that send you pretty far back if you miss a jump, but in my opinion this just increases the level of satisfaction that you get whenever you finally pass it. But aside from the general difficulty in the platforming, I think one of the more memorable things about this game is the fact that you can find and buy equipment and magic and armor and other things to help you do better in your moment-to-moment gameplay. There's not so many that they begin to feel unrewarding when you unlock one, and they're different enough to where you might want to experiment with them as soon as you unlock them. You might have a sword that's longer than your original sword. You might have a boomerang that can hit enemies twice. You might have something a little completely different and off the wall. You also have magic that you can charge up just by holding down the attack button. It's a very simple game, but there's a decent amount of depth and a lot to keep you entertained throughout the relatively short playtime. And if you're feeling adventurous, there is a special mode where you can unlock a frog character to play as, and it changes the game just a little bit, just like you're playing one of the optional modes in one of the older Castlevania games. It's really cheap on Steam now, so if you can get past the old school aesthetics and some of the more janky aspects of the game, I think you're going to have a really, really good time with Castle in the Darkness. One of my favorite things to do in gaming is to find games that cross two genres that you never thought would have anything to do with each other. This next game does exactly that, and it was suggested by my guitar teacher of all people. Yokos Island Express does something really weird. It gives you a relatively classic Metroidvania experience filled with collectibles and items to unlock and abilities to discover and a whole world to explore, but with the conceit and gimmick of a pinball-inspired control system. I'm not joking. You're a little dung beetle rolling around this little marble ball, and you move around by getting bonked around by bumpers all over the place. This is another game I haven't finished because I only just recently picked it up because I wanted to see what it was all about. But now that I'm halfway through the game, I can say that it's pretty well worth it. It's unique and it's charming, it's colorful and it's cute, and it's a Metroidvania through and through. That said, I do have some complaints. There's not really any combat, and most of the difficulty comes through just controlling your character and hitting the bumper just right. Because of the way that you have to move around through the map using bumpers, it can be a little bit frustrating trying to 100% the game. Trying to get that little collectible, you might not know exactly how to get there, and even if you do know how to get there, you're probably gonna spend like 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 tries just trying to get that right hit to get exactly where you need to get that one little collectible. In that way, I find it a little bit frustrating at times, but I think that's well worth the price of admission. Because what you have here is something really unique, really adorable, and something that we'll probably never see again unless Yokos Island Express comes out with a sequel. In general, I would love to see more experimental games like this, especially in one of my favorite subgenres, the Metroidvania. So, if for nothing else, Yoku's Island Express is worth buying and playing just to see how these two genres are mixing in this title. For those of you who want a little more RPG in your Metroidvania, this next game is going to be just down your alley. Unepic is one of my favorite games of all time, and I don't know if there's even any real good reason for that other than the fact that it came at the right time when it was a game that I was really craving for whatever reason. It's a cheesy game filled with pop culture references and is an homage to gaming as a whole with all of its writing. You'll have references to games like Warcraft and Starcraft, and that's not even to mention the fact that before the main character ended up where he is, he was playing a game of D&D with his buddies. It doesn't get more referential than that. That said, the writing's really not that great, and it's not really why I love the game so much. In fact, I think I'd be hard-pressed to really call Unepic a true Metroidvania because there's not really much in the way of challenging platforming or abilities that increase your platforming capability. It's more of an RPG and a Metroidvania-style map, but it's close enough that I think it's worth including here because I think Metroidvania fans would really like it. Unepic gives you a lot to explore, and it has a lot of replayability in the way that the skill system works. When you level up, you're granted some skill points to use to bolster your ability to do various combat-related things, like magic, using polearms, using daggers, using armor, or just plain old getting more health. And you're definitely not granted enough points to be able to do everything you could possibly want, so you gotta be careful. But what that means is you could probably go through your first playthrough with heavy armor and swords and axes, something relatively traditional, and then play hard mode on your next playthrough and focus on a magic build. But outside of that, what really hooks me about Unepic is just the sheer amount of stuff in the game to explore. And the game's torch system, while somewhat tedious, is a really good way to track where you've been and what rooms you've finished. So for those of you who are like me and tend to be completionist-y but like the convenience of some of the features that help you do that completionist stuff, Unepic is gonna feel really good. The combat is a little basic, it can be pretty grindy at times with some of the quests that you have to do, and its UI is a little bit unintuitive and a little bit janky, and you can tell that this was made by a relatively inexperienced game developer. However, what he's made here is something that I personally cherish and love. Like I said, Unepic is one of my favorite games of all time, so if you think you can get past some of the jankiness of the game and some of the bad UI decisions, I'd say go ahead and pick it up. And if you want to pick it up, you pretty much can pick it up on whatever console you want. He's ported it to so many things, so you can either get it on PC, you can get it on Switch, you can get it on the Wii U, I think. PS4, Xbox One, if you want to play this game, you probably have the means. Just throw some money over there, and you'll be well on your way. This final game is one of the more traditional Metroidvanias on the list, but it's also the only one that I would actually put on my top 5 Metroidvania games of all time. It's just that good. Environmental Station Alpha is a game that really caught me off guard when I first picked it up. I had no idea what to expect from the game. I was just looking for another Metroidvania title, and I landed on this. At first, the 8-bit style graphics were really hard to look at, really hard to understand and grasp what was going on, and some of the text even is really hard to read, like the W's and H's look almost exactly alike. But once you get into the game and you dive in and you begin to explore, and you start to fight the bosses and the enemies, and you uncover parts of the map and you start uncovering some power-ups, you'll begin to understand why I feel like this game is so good. Like most of the other games in this particular video, this is a pretty challenging title. At pretty much any point throughout the game, whenever you fight a boss, even if you've explored everything that you possibly can up to that boss to get as much health and as much power as you possibly could, that boss is still going to be challenging until you begin to understand its patterns and avoid its attacks. Most of the bosses in this game are designed incredibly well and are very satisfying to fight and defeat. And when you combine that with the scope of the world, which feels large in spite of how surprisingly dense it is, I mean seriously, when you have everything 100% explored, there's almost 0 empty spots on the entire map. That's really impressive. What you end up with is a really memorable experience that has a lot to give even after you beat the game and get the bad ending. And yeah, there are multiple endings to this game, including a very large and very interesting and different kind of post-game challenge to get the best ending. This post-game stuff seriously elevated Environmental Station Alpha from a very great game to one of my favorite of all time. And I feel like I'm saying this for a lot of the games in this video, but if you feel like you can get past the 8-bit aesthetic, definitely give Environmental Station Alpha a try, especially if you like difficult platforming, difficult bosses, difficult games, and grappling hooks, because this game has a grappling hook and it's just a delight to use. And that's the list. If you've played all of these games already, let me know in the comment section below, because I'd love to know if anybody that's watching is as big of a nerd as I am. And I know that you're all probably waiting for my really late review on Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, and don't worry, it's coming. Slowly but surely, it's gonna happen. My stomach's growling. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to make that, but here, have this video in the meantime. So if you haven't already, go check out some of these games. There's a lot here for you to sink your teeth into if you haven't played them already, and I highly recommend each and every one of them. Thank you for watching, thanks to Raid Shadow Legends and the Weird Little Closet Goblin for sponsoring this video, and I will see you next time.